Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another session of our ArtPulse project. My name is Diana Stoica, and I'm the director of our ArtPulse project. And I'm very happy that those sessions are taking up very fast. This is the second time we are hosting a Zoom interview. We just hosted one a few weeks back with Paige Collins, an advocate from Free Muse, which is an organization that helps to promote freedom of expression worldwide. And today we have another amazing guest. We have Shazeera Zawawi with us, who is a human rights advocate, a lawyer by training, and a cartoonist. So she will tell us all about it. Just by means of introduction, I wanted to say, really just reiterate how happy I am that this project is taking shape, because what we do here at ArtPulse is really to gather together collaborators from all around the world, people who are lawyers, people who are painters, cartoonists, photographers, and so on, that use their art to convey a message that is strictly tied to a human right issue, concern, or a human right win in many cases, because it's very important to talk also about the positives. And by talking about these things, what ArtPulse does is really trying to explain and develop the links between art and human rights, which are many, and to demystify this position that art is just something that is completely abstract and remote from what happens to the real people, and that is something that only perhaps the privileged or the wealthy or the elites can experience and have access to. That is absolutely not right. Participation in the cultural life of a country is vital to human development, dignity, which is at the core of human rights, and development at large. And we will see how this really stands at the very bottom of every human interaction, and you can never take art away from people. So it's absolutely not something that is just placed somewhere high, that is intangible and just very abstract. But this was a very long introduction. I will let Shazeera introduce herself, and we can start. Please, Shazeera, go on.
Hi, Diana. Thank you so much for having me today. It's also a great pleasure to be part of this series that Human Rights Pulse is initiating. Hello, everyone. My name is Shazeera, but people call me G or Shaz for short. I am a lawyer by training, but at the moment I'm working with a Swiss-based organization called Association for Prevention of Torture, APT. And as the name suggests, the focus of our work is actually preventing torture around the world. And the way we do this is actually by working and cooperating with government agencies, national human rights institutions, authorities, and also detainees and their families in some contexts to promote better policies and practices on torture prevention. So that's the general idea of the work that APT is doing. And I am the senior advisor on research and innovation. So my main task is actually to bring to the table and to support my colleagues and also partners in the ideation and conceptualization of solutions and activities that could, overcome some of the challenges that we have in our work. I'm also into, as you know, cartooning and drawing and data visualization. That's my latest interest. But overall, creativity and artistic pursuit is part of my passion. And I try as much as I can to integrate it in my work. So that's just, I think, a short introduction about myself.
Lovely, absolutely amazing. As I always say, whenever I hear our guests speaking, of course, people can imagine I'm always in contact with the guests. I know what they do. I know their work, but every time when I hear it again, especially from themselves, I'm like, wow, this is absolutely tremendous what they do, their involvement, and how well they manage to really put together a set of disciplines in such a beautiful way. So yeah, indeed, you said that you work on the prevention of torture, and I know that most of your work is geared towards that topic. I was wondering whether you could tell us about a concrete example of a case or a situation that you studied that particularly caught your attention or that left a mark on you, and how you translated that into a cartoon.
Okay. That's a very interesting question. As you may also, or some of the people may have read what I wrote for the Human Rights Pulse. I started off not sure whether I want to really do this. I know that I would love to, but I think the opportunity only, came to me when I moved to Switzerland for the job with APT. And in the beginning, I wasn't a senior advisor for research and innovation. I was a project officer for Asia Pacific program for APT. And my work largely focused on the region, particularly in some of our priority countries, like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand, Philippines. And I work a lot there, especially with the civil society organizations. So I think a particular incident that still, left a mark on me was in 2014. I just, it was my first year working with APT, and also it was a year that one of the quite well-known activists in Thailand, an indigenous community activist by the name of Billy. He disappeared. He was last seen in the forest reserve, arrested by some rangers, police rangers, on the allegation that he stole some honey from the forest. So Billy came from a tribe in Thailand, and he's very active in upholding and advocating for the land rights of his people. So there is definitely some connection here between what happened and his disappearance. So when I heard about the story, and I heard about the, my partners and people I work with in Thailand wanted to do something about it. So I proposed to, and I offered, I said, why don't we draw a very simple one-page comic to visualize Billy? Who is Billy? And whether he deserved to disappear. And then we just focus on the not mundane, but the simple terms of who Billy is as a person. Billy is a father, Billy is an activist, and then one day Billy just disappear. Is just to reinforce the idea that enforced disappearance, particularly in the context of Thailand, can happen to anyone in that regard. And the connection has always been with somebody who are considered to be a threat to the powers that be, with regard to their activism, with regard to their works with the human rights and democracy. And then before you know it, they disappear. So this is the kind of messaging and that we wanted to sort of deliver through the comic. It was a very simple one. I did it, without thinking more about it. I just wanted to tell the story of Billy in a very, very simple way. And then that's it. And it was used to, to advocate, and to NGOs were using it to disseminate to others. But then one day I saw that the NGO was actually sharing the artwork with Billy's family. And there was a picture of Billy's wife holding the comic, being, you know, fully framed, and she's holding it. And I didn't know about that it was sent to her, but yeah, but then I saw the picture, and my partners in Thailand shared it with me. And I don't know, it just gets to me when I see the photo of the wife with the comic. It just evoke a feeling inside of me that yes, I need to continue doing this. You know, I need to do this, to tell the stories in the way that I can. And even though we have, you know, language barriers, because she doesn't speak English, I don't speak Thai, but that's beside the point. And this is where images are universal. This is where visuals, comics could convey messages, and it transcends this sort of barriers. And from there onward, I felt, okay, I wanted to do this more. And then it gets, yeah, and then it gets covered a bit more. And then I got like interesting news, like the news broadcast in Thailand was using it as their backdrop when they were reporting on the case. You know, it just, and that doesn't matter much to me. I was just surprised that a comic, and twice already my comic was used by the broadcast for that purpose. But it's more about when I see the work in the hands of people that matters, in the sense of these are the people that were affected by the incident. And if I hear from them themselves a thank you, or you know, a sense of understanding of what they're going through, I think that's the most meaningful impact that I can get out of it. And that's how I just continue to draw. Yeah.
That is very profound and very, like, it really gives a concrete feeling to it. Did you ever feel scared about this whole thing when you saw that your cartoon? So imagine, I can imagine myself in a country that has perhaps some censorship problems, or where human rights activists are being kidnapped effectively, and then I see me with a comic, an activist, and when my comic blows up, I would be very scared.
There were different layers of response to your question. The first layer is, I feel that whatever I'm doing at the moment as myself is from a place of privilege. It's a very interesting way to see it as well. I am here in Switzerland working with an international organization. I am, in that sense, away from that threat, away from that pressure. And that just means that I should use where I am at the moment to help and to support the work of human rights defenders wherever I'm working in. That's my position. One layer of the response. Second layer is, I've always been a human rights advocate, in the sense of, from my university days, I joined the protests in Malaysia. You know, I do a lot of stuff when I was in Malaysia that could be considered as anti-establishment or risky. So I know, and I'm well aware of the risk. And I think that also helps me in the sense of give me this insights and experience as well on how to handle it. I think it's very interesting as well, because at the same time, I'm also working with authorities and the government. So of course, at the first point when I start drawing, I always remain anonymous with the drawings. People know who draw it, it's fine, but I never go out and say I draw this or I draw that. And at that point, it was not so much because of my lack of confidence anymore. It's just because I'm kind of, straddling two different positions, or, two different ways of advocating for human rights. And I want to maintain and keep both ways possible, especially in the context of Thailand. Oh, now it's out in the interview, so everybody knows, but it's okay. No, but yeah, so I've always been in the beginning, of course. But and then the third layer of answer that I want to say, I think, of course, when you're doing this work, there will be even the tiniest sense of fear. And I think it's good. It's always good. Fear is a good feeling. We fear it because we know that what we're doing is important, it's difficult, it has its sets of challenges, and yet we want to do it because we believe in it, and we want to do it because we want to uphold human rights, we want to help those who are in the, you know, in the worst position, or those who are in the most vulnerable position. So because of that, I think it's okay to have the fear, and many times fear, I always channel it in a healthier way, in the sense of, that means fear can also fit into, you know, how you want to channel positively your advocacy, how you are mindful about the risks that you will face. So to me, fear is just part and parcel of the work. I'm not going to say I have no fear or I'm fearless. I think it's normal, and also it's good for people to know that it's okay to have that fear if you want to do something good. It goes to everyone, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just going to share something personal with the fear, the fear thing, because I just said, oh, I imagine myself if I were there, or if I was the person drawing the cartoon, I would be very scared. I recently noticed a shift within myself. Now, obviously, I'm also talking from a very privileged position here in my nice, comfortable desk and chair in Scotland, talking about human rights. I always have a bit of internal conflict when even when speaking about human rights, because I think of my privilege first and foremost, but it's important to do so regardless.
Yeah.
I was saying I noticed the shift of, I was very, very scared when I was younger. Maybe it was indeed due to age. And then when I realized, when I really started to understand the issues in the world and how to solve them at the same time. So again, the good and the bad, I really started doing, I think, what you were trying to say. So that form of risk assessment and positive fear. So instead of being just paranoid and fearful, or even saying anything, or even I remember when I published my first article about human rights issues, I for a brief second there I thought, oh, what if some government reads that and it's not aligned with their beliefs and they're going to knock at my door and then deport me? Of course, a very unlikely scenario, very, like, you know, we're almost entering into the paranoia field. And now I think, no, even if I have sometimes maybe even more concrete or rational fears, and I know that what I do and what many other advocates do is the right thing, and even if something happens to me, I kind of accept it. I think that that's the right thing, and if bad comes out of it, there must be some movement. If you want to break the status quo, we need to have a change, good or bad, whatever that entails. So I absolutely agree with what you say. Although I will ask you, I think at the end of the talk, I would really like to know more ways of how you channel your. Actually, I'm going to ask you now. Like, it makes sense to why at the end. I'm asking you now.
Yeah.
Ways of channeling the fear in a healthy way. So I guess your drawing is one of
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, that will be my immediate go-to. I think drawing is one thing. I think meditation is another. You know, I'm a person of faith. I'm a Muslim, and I think having that moment with your God, of your creator, is also powerful and empowering. It's not about, you know, it's not about exposing to others, but it's just more about the monologue that you have. And I think everyone in the position of having that spiritual or that faith-based connection can use that to address this fear. And to me, in any situation, you can use that as well. So yeah, so that's the more obvious ones for me. And then, of course, as you do it more often, and I think it's not like I want to quote practice made perfect, but then maybe it's not so appropriate in this context. But it's just about you do it, you know, you keep doing it, and you do it in different ways as well. I think learning out of the experience of being fearful, or yeah, learning out of this fear that you experience is also important. And for me, part of it is translating it into my artwork. You know, so sometimes you feel like, so even sometimes when you draw, or when I draw, I have that monologue in myself. Do I want this photo to represent the issue, or do I want this photo, this artwork, to represent what I envision the world should be? You know, is it going to be transformative? Is it going to be descriptive? And I think, yeah, I think those assessments and those conversations that I have with myself is also, you know, part and parcel of me dealing with the uncertainties and the fear that I feel when you're doing in this work. And I also just want to highlight the fact that you know, the gender perspective of all the situation. I mean, being a woman, you know, the fear could be amplified because of various reasons and contexts. And despite the fact that, yeah, there are many positive developments of how women are being more respected and protected in different contexts, but we don't deny the fact that the risks and the threats are still out there. And it's really targeting women human rights defenders, women activists. And of course, that is, you know, doubling the fear factor that we're talking about. And in some cases, I felt like, yeah, I felt that women human rights defenders or women human rights advocates are very, very empowering in that sense, because we know their story. We know that they could be mothers or not, but they could have a family, or, you know, they could be doing whatever they're doing in a very difficult and challenging context or situation where whatever they're doing could be misconceived or misconstrued as something else. Yeah, patriarchal system and, you know, frameworks are still there. So this is also kind of like amplifying a bit the element of fear I feel for women.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But at the same time, it's beautiful to see how you're shifting this not into your favor, but in everyone's favor. So you're using that fear factor to empower and amplify this message even more. So that is very laudable and very impressive. I really know it is. It is. I really aspire to be a person like that, and I'm actually very happy because even in the context of this project or other projects and the human rights human rights sphere, the people you meet in this sphere, I am surrounded by very inspiring people, very inspiring women. So I'm every single day I'm grateful for that. Moving from the fear element, I have a number of things that I wanted to ask you. Let's begin with the narratives. So see how you said before that you have in your work you combine two ways of telling a story, two narratives, namely, or at least I assume, the traditionally professional one, so your work as a senior advisor, researcher, working with authorities, with governments, and then telling a story through visual images and your work as an artist. How do you reconcile those narratives, and what do you think we should do to tell better stories in both ways, so both in the professional way and in the visual image context?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. I think first and foremost, getting the narrative right, whether visual or textual, is very important. And we see now the move towards storytelling is very, a lot of people are very into storytelling at the moment. But then, you know, it begs the question, whose story are you telling? and what are the ingredients, what are the framework of telling the story. And I'm always interested in that. I know that we have wonderful storytellers out there, but I'm also intrigued and interested to know, when we are telling the stories of those who are in pain, of those who are disappeared, of those who are the victims, how do we do it in the right way as well? How do we respect the stories? Because I think at the end of the day, we are just telling the stories of the others, and this awareness, which kind of like, not, I didn't just get it immediately. It kind of built into the experience I have over the years as well, mistakes I made, that, you know, at the end of the day, sometimes you have to rein in yourself a bit. You have to ask those questions, whether you're just being an artist, whether you just want to be a visual storyteller, or you are here with a purpose, and whether that purpose is serving the interests of those that you are telling the stories for. So I always believe in collaborations. I always believe in the process have to be a process that there is a mutual understanding, that is done in the spirit of of collaboration, because, as I say, it's not my story. That's the kind of the first point about narrative. And in the traditional way of writing or presenting the narrative, I think it's interesting how we see sometimes the voice of the stories, or the voice of those stories who we found in the report, kind of not there in that sense. Instead, it's been replaced by a more methodical, dry, sterilized approach to the report or to what's been told. And I think at this point, I think this is where it's important to bring out the voice of the people. And this can happen both in the engagement that we did with the government, as well as the engagement that I have as an artist at my personal level. So I carry that principle, I carry that mission in both hats that I wear, as a visual storyteller, as well as an humorous advocate with APT. So for example, when we have our meetings and discussions with government agencies, with authorities, it's very important for us to not just talk about the symptoms, the problems, the statistics, the typical human rights recommendations, the standards, the policy-driven text, but we also would, more often than not, try to bring in the stories that sort of inspire the report, or the story that really begs the questions from the authorities. Why is this happening? Or, you know, so it's very important for us to make sure those voices are included in how we engage and we dialogue with the authorities. So that's one way of doing it. And sometimes I have to accept the fact as well that I might not be able to reconcile it. You know, that sometimes I could draw because it's within my control what I draw. I have a full control in terms of the creative expression and how I want to create the message, the intended message. It is within my control as a storyteller. But sometimes what I do as a human rights advocate is not so much in my control. It depends on context. It depends on political will. It depends on what are the risks on the ground, or what are the challenges that could hinder whatever efforts we're trying to do. So sometimes I just have to accept the fact that in this regard, I could not really reconcile it. And sometimes this only means that maybe it's much more effective for me, for instance, to influence or to work on changing the narrative or trying to promote that using the art medium, using the popular medium, and that the boardroom discussions might not be the best place for that. And I think reality is that's how it is. And for me, this only means that as a person who kind of have, or who hold wearing those two hats, I have to make the strategic decision and judgment, what works best for the interest of those that I'm working with. I think, yeah, you have to make these decisions and assessments. I don't know whether that answered the question, but yeah.
No, absolutely did. Just before answering, now I'm gonna make an announcement, which is very fun in terms of work from home. I'm just gonna go and let my flatmate in that is banging on the door, and I will be back in just 1 second. So
no problem.
It'll be very funny for whoever is listening to us to see this pause, but I'll be back.
Sure, no problem.
There you go. Sorry everyone for that brief interruption. As we say, we have a saying in Italian, il bello della diretta, which means the good and bad of the live sessions. But yeah, no, totally. I wanted to say that this explained very much the importance of always assessing whose interests you're serving, and to really make sure that that voice is there. So for example, I find this to be correlated when I see instances of gender-based violence, or in the rape culture discourse, where you see that the voice of the victim is always neutralized. And for example, rape is always something that happens to women. There are no perpetrators, or it's just something that is analyzed in that very dry or sterilized way, or on the contrary, in a very almost patronizing way, but the voice of the victim is annihilated. So it's almost something that is written to atone society as a whole for the horrible thing that happens to happen to women. So I think it's fundamental to stress that really we must rethink narrative and frameworks and include that voice. So to that effect, I have an initial question for you. Do you often consult with say, for example, you're drawing about torture, victims of torture, or how does it get their consent, or how does that consultation process works? So that you, or maybe not even consent, let's say consent on one side, or you really want to make them, their voices heard, and you want to ask them how they want the story to be told. How do you go about in asking them?
Yes, I think, yeah, I would normally directly ask the person who I intended to write about or to draw about, and also to explain, I think, not only the fact that they are going to be drawn, but also what is the purpose and where this work is going to, and how this work is going to be used. I think it's important for them to know where their stories are going, or it's just applying the typical way of how I do my research. For instance, when you interview, when you interview people for your research, we normally explain and also make it as consultative as possible, because I felt like I'm more into the possibilities of making this, research and processes more consultative and open, to include those who are affected, or victims, former detainees. I think it's important to include them in the process, and so it's very important for me to have that chat with them first and ask them, how do they feel about it. Of course, that's the ideal situation, and there are instances where you read about a story in the newspaper, and or you heard about it, or you read it in a report, and you feel like this is a story, or this is a newspaper coverage that could be transformed into a comic, or into a cartoon, into a comic most of the time, that I took the steps more in terms of, informing and consulting others in that sense, because for cartoons, as you see, my, for satire, for my satirical work, it's more like how I presenting the cartoons, how I express my opinion about the cartoons. But for some of the comics that I draw, especially on the issue of torture, it does touches, or it does involve the stories or the life of others. So ideally, yes, if it's a first-hand story, I will ask them and I will involve them in the process. But on the other hand, as I say, if it's only a news coverage or something that I heard or read from the others, I think making the effort to verify and to find out a bit more about what's going on is very important. Even when I was drawing, so for the comic that I was drawing in Thailand regarding the criminalization of torture, there was a couple of panels that I draw depicting a case that happened in the Deep South, where a person was tortured using a plastic bag. So when I make decisions on what sort of visuals I should use, it was not just because it's artistic or beautiful to draw a man laying on the ground with his head covered with a plastic bag. It's because that's what happened. And people need to know that this happened, this incidents happened. And of course, there's always questions, right? Like, yeah, but it's a comic in the end of the day. How would people take it seriously? A comic is still a comic. But you'd be surprised, and I am so surprised, that sometimes comic can be a very powerful medium where a context or a society where they are facing censorship, where information like this is considered a taboo and could not be found on the news or, highlighted often in a newspaper or in the television, because there is censorship, and there is filtration of information. You'd be surprised how mediums such as comics could be seen as powerful and important source of information. And that's why we made the call. So it was APT, and then our partner in Thailand at that time, it was Cross Culture Foundation, it was Amnesty International, it was International Commission of Jurists. We sort of sit together and say, for that year, for the 26th of June celebration, we wanted to have a comic released about the issue of torture, because at a point of time, Thailand wanted to go ahead with their anti-torture law, which is very important. And we wanted to highlight that point in conjunction with the 26th of June celebration. And we chose to do it with a comic. So we come up with the story together, verify. I mean, we have lawyers in the room, we have activists in the room, and I was just a storyteller, right? And it's really interesting as well to see the dynamics, to see the interactions, to see what people bring to the table. And I always enjoy that. The process is never easy, of course. People have opinions. And in the work of the human rights world, opinions can be very strong. And, it's understandable. But then it's really interesting to see what we can come up with when we have such process in place, when we consult everyone, and to tell the story that we want to tell. So that was how, we came out with the comic. It was really well received during that year. Some of our colleagues from the organizations were also sharing it with people at the coffee shops. Again, it came out in the newspaper, in the news broadcast. I always find it hilarious because I know that there was a limitation for them to show, like, they can't really show pictures or video clips of people being tortured. So instead, they use the visuals from my comic to sort of report on the ongoings of torture in Thailand. So it's really interesting to see how, how a medium like this can function can play its role in the context of a country like Thailand. So that sort of gave me, that sort of was very inspiring, and also give me this motivation that, you know, in the face of censorship, in the face of limitations of resources, you know, of threats and risks, creativity can always prevail. You always find a way. And you were talking to Free Muse last week, which I think is really, really cool, because my dissertation, my final dissertation for my master was about censorship, and I used a case study of the Arab Spring and the censorship during that time. And Free Muse is one of the organizations that I interviewed for my dissertation. And so I was like, yeah, Free Muse, yes. And yeah, it's really amazing what sometimes when you're pushed to that extent, amazing what kind of creative outcomes that you will see as well. That's just the human nature, you know. It's a symbol of resilience, but it's also a symbol of hope. We always wanted something to be better. We always wanted something, you know, to, you know, despite of how we felt the world is broken, you know, but these are all elements that can also transform the way you see it, you know. And I believe in that. I don't know, maybe I'm too idealistic, but I do believe in that.
That is, I have, again, so many things to say. Sorry, I need to stop the recording because, again, there is some flatmate movement just happening. I will be back in 2 seconds. Sorry. And we are back. Today's is one of those exciting days of many things happening at the same time. But no, I'm super excited because I have a number of things to comment on and again ask. Okay, so actually, let's start from the boardroom discussion. Okay, so again, if you can comment on this, I found it very interesting what you said about the boardroom setting. That is exactly not how we should work, especially with the standard recommendation that happen always in human rights. And, you know, people, once again, usually privileged people sitting on a table, at a table, and just pretty much reiterating trite law on some parts, or just trite arguments, and then we arrive at nothing. And before you mentioned how you got together in that consultative process and creative process where you talk to governments and the persons involved, or rather your association, and I think you said something of like along the lines of we sit at the table, or you get input from all the people and then you get to the creative solution. How does that differ from the boardroom boring dry strategy that doesn't work? And what would you recommend to everyone? Because I think everyone has sat on one of those boardrooms, even students. Like, you know, I'm in a student committee, and we sit and we discuss, and we always have so many ideas, but then often what the problem is that so many ideas, not so much action, unfortunately, because you don't really know how to go about it, and you end up in that boardroom discussion loop. So how to get the most out of it, to really get to that creativity that prevails over this very sometimes disheartening, disillusioned, dark narratives about human rights that just led to yet another report, yet another recommendation, and then nothing ever changes.
People might hate me for this, but I also think that it's important to go through that boardroom sessions. Here is the thing: when we're advocating for human rights, we have to talk to different audience who have different level of comfort, who have different level of confidence and trust in you. I always believe in confidence building and trust building as key to human rights advocacy. You want to talk to an authority, you want to talk to a government agency, you want them to listen to you, or vice versa. You want to have that relationship where you can really sit them down at the table and put it on the table. some level of trust and confidence is needed. And this is me wearing my hat, you know, as one of those people who have to attend these meetings. And you have to do it, because to initiate change, the mobilization of the society and what we're doing is, of course, fundamental. It's important. And every one of us, you know, have a role to play. But at the end of the day, we have to go to the policymakers, to the decision makers, to make sure that this change can be institutionalized, can be adopted in the frameworks of what they're doing. So if it's law, then it's law. If it's a human rights national policy, it's a human rights national policy. It could be a budget discussion, which is it's very dry, I guess. But yeah, it's another one of those discussions, right? But as a human rights advocate, and I think I'm just not speaking for myself here, we have to go through these processes where we advocate for change with different audience and in different places. So the boardroom, to a certain extent, is there to stay, right? But I think it's more about how we want to not take over, but how we want to have a control of the discussion, how we want to take control of the narrative when we are sitting down with them in these discussions. You know, how do we formulate our recommendations? How do we actually making sure that, for instance, we want to make sure that they are well aware, for instance, of the voices of those who are unheard, for instance. There are a lot of, I think there's a lot of efforts or initiative at the moment by different groups trying to initiate creative ways and different ways of doing dialogues or engagements with government. Now, talking about APT as an institution, we don't believe in just having one meeting and leave. We're not going to like do the kind of like the, you know, touch and go sort of situation. And we also know that in many cases, they will not like what we say. But in regard to that, that's why, you know, we take years sometimes to build that rapport, to build that understanding, or to build that dialogue with governments. It cannot be built in 1 year, or sometimes it cannot be built overnight. You have to take time to do that. And again, I'm speaking with that hat, right? But at the same time, we also have to be the bridge between that conversation in the boardroom and also what's really happening out there that maybe some of these people in the boardroom doesn't even know or realize or aware of. And either we, in our process of engaging them, could be counterproductive to the process of making them aware, or we make them more aware of what's going on. So I think this is where the role of telling the story, the role of offering the right narrative, so then the right sort of, you know, information, the right sort of story can be shared, can be told to the people in the boardroom, whoever they are. But basically, yes, that's the kind of bridging role that APT always play as well. It's not an easy role because we also try to be as transparent as we can, which means when we talk to the government, they also know that we are working with the NGOs. And when we work with the NGOs, they also know that we're talking to the government and working with the government. So both sides know where we are. And we are in a unique position in that sense, because we believe that for torture to be prevented, everybody must be at the table to discuss it. We can take to just working with the civil society organizations. Yes, we can. But if we're really looking towards criminalizing torture in the criminal justice system, ensuring safeguards are implemented during the first hour of police custody, it's not within the mandate and the capacity of the NGOs to do it. It's within the capacity and mandate of the state, of the government, of the authorities. And this is where it is important to have everyone who's playing their role at the table. So that's the kind of approach that APT takes. And it's not easy. The way I'm telling it sounds like it's easy, but it's not. It's not, you know. Of course, because people, like I say, have very strong views about things, have a mindset that they have been holding for years, have belief, have justifications that they have been telling themselves over and over again that it's okay to torture. So you're dealing with this kind of people. And to change their mindset, it doesn't take overnight to do that. It won't take overnight to do that.
I absolutely agree. And I think you gave an excellent, very accurate response, and really touched upon the core of my question. Not to say that you haven't answered the previous one, you did as well, but this one particular one, it was also a bit provoking, of course, but the emphasis on bridging that gap and having everyone talking at that, like making the boardroom bigger for everyone and offering the right narrative. I really think that is exactly how it should work. So, and I think you also said something interesting before when you cited being so when you draw, you are completely in control of what you do, of the narrative you say. You can fact check, you can talk to people involved, whereas in your human rights advocacy or activism or whatever other form of work you might do, you're dependent on the political will, the political context, the legal context, the historic momentum in general. So you can also become then strategic with your audiences before you get to that very enlarged boardroom where everyone plays its role. And again, something fundamental that I think you said when you concluded, saying that you can talk to the NGO and you can raise awareness about this and that, but then it's up to a state parliament to change the laws, or sometimes the government via executive order. So if you don't engage in that sort of boardroom discussion, how are you going to change it? So absolutely on point what the response that you gave. And I think that, yes, again, another comment, it won't happen overnight. So the more like the work that you do, the work that human rights advocates do, and either way, sitting at a boardroom, drawing cartoons or both, which is what should happen, we should keep on doing that and really plant the seeds, because one day they will flourish. Funnily enough, I was reading an article, say how you mentioned the justifications that people tell themselves for torturing, for example. And I was reading, I just saw headlines in fairness about the death penalty in the US, and there was a mention of an Arizona prison that is, I haven't fact checked, I have to say, so I just saw this headline. It might actually be not true. It was on the BBC, I believe. Let's say that it's legit. And they were talking about introducing a specific gas that was used in the Nazi regime to execute very sadly Jews. And I started to having some thoughts about the concept of death penalty and how many people support that, and how the mental psychological justifications go on for that. And I just linked it back to what you said, and how intensive this work is. Well, not intensive. It's hard to really not lose hope and plant those seeds in the long term, because there is a lot of work to be done. Changing a mindset and changing deeply ingrained beliefs is not easy. But then again, I'm just stressing how important it is to do this work. I was also wanting to ask you something. I read another headline today about a prison in Indonesia. I think that was, I don't know if you've heard about it. It was today.
Maybe I haven't.
It was just to say, it was about a prison in Indonesia that caught fire because it was built in 1972, and the electrical system hadn't been checked since then. And there was, of course, the ongoing discussion about raising awareness about the fact that prisoners are humans. Prisoners have human rights as well. And I think that this is something that people tend to forget. So when we're talking torture, death penalty, prisoners, when bad crimes are involved, we tend to justify ourselves and say, oh, torture might be justified. So maybe you can say something about your experience in working maybe in working with prisoners, detainees, or the prison system in countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia. I don't know if there is some, like I just heard about this one prison in Indonesia, but maybe it's a systemic problem that there are terrible prison conditions. I don't know. I'm asking you have something to say about that.
Oh yeah, I think that region in particular, we do have problems with prison conditions. And the situation could vary. So the example that you gave is one of the example how prison has not been enhanced, the facilities, the quality, that it's still in a very, very bad shape, and then causing it to be on fire. But there's also other elements of poor conditions as well. That includes overcrowding, in the region particularly. The overcrowding issue is contributed by the criminalization of drugs. So there's a lot of drug related offense. People who face or suffered from drug related offense charges were detained. And the number of pre-trial detainee, for instance, and the overcrowding of pre-trial detention centers are quite severe in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Philippines, in Thailand. Even in Philippines, for instance, there were incidents of secret cells where the prisons are no longer, are too packed, too overcrowded. It can go to 200%, 300% over capacity. And the National Human Rights Commission of the Philippines at one point in 2013 and I think in 2017 found secret cells in the police lockups, which means police created this this secret hole or something to keep the people that they arrested. So there's a wide range of problem around prison conditions in the region, and yeah, there are a number of factors contributing to that. And I guess you are referring to one particular factor, which is how do public perceive detainees or persons deprived of liberty in general. And this perception is quite a true story in many situations as well. We talked to some of the people in our work when we were in the region, and there is this element of like thinking that persons deprived of liberty, they deserve it. They deserve whatever happened to them. And this is not just coming from the members of community, but this also comes from the police themselves. Some of the police officers, not all of them, but some of the police officers. I mean, they were also saying that if we use excessive force, it's because they deserve it, and it's also a form of punishment to remind them not to do it again. So this is the kind of some of the typical narrative or mindset that justify the use of torture. And of course, the problem is because there's also this element of lack of understanding about presumption of innocence, that a person, is innocent until proven guilty. And it's important that regardless of who they are, that they have been deprived of their liberty until they go through the process and they're found guilty. And so this element, I think, is not highlighted a lot in a lot of the conversations that we have. It's more about they deserve it. They are the enemy of the state. They are, if the police don't do this to them, then they're going to cause a threat to public peace and security. So there is this element, that sort of reinforces and continues to justify this sort of mistreatment among persons deprived of liberty. And it's not just in the cases of in the context of the person deprived of liberty, like drug-related offenses, or or the usual crime suspects, but we're also talking about migrant workers or refugee or asylum seekers. We have a lot of work to do in terms of shifting the narrative from seeing these people as a threat, and seeing these people as as a risk to the society, especially in the context of the COVID-19. Just see how the whole xenophobic mentality is amplified during the COVID-19. People are saying, oh, it just happened because of COVID. No, it's always been there. COVID just exposes it, so this is the kind of, this is other narrative, like this is the other situations in the society, stories in the society that we have to address and rectify as well. And that's why during the COVID-19, I started the Instagram account, because I wanted to, it's also my way of dealing with my own stress, being kept at home and wanting to do more, and yet you can't, feeling hopeless, feeling like the world is, falling. And every time you hear the news, you get more emotional than usual. So I was trying to beat all these feelings of helplessness. So that's why I started the Instagram. It's also a way of me just to channel all these frustrations and all these thoughts. And of course, at the same time, I also noticed that, like it's also a way for me to assess or to see how the situation is, how it never changed or how it becomes worse. For instance, for the migrant workers, for the refugee, for the asylum seekers, and how I want to depict this. I want to show this in my cartoons, and that's why I some of my drawings are trying to depict them. And I use symbols, like I make them smaller in size, I make them look weak. It's not because I feel like they're weak, but it's because the world is looking to them like they are the problem here, that they are the enemy here. So yeah, so it's a very interesting thing what the COVID is doing, I think, to a lot of creative minds out there. And I've never seen, the good thing about it is I've never seen such a vibrant art community. The COVID-19 in many ways have made people become more creative, more artistic. Being kept at home means you have more hours and time to draw. And that's our window to the world. We can't go out. We have to respect all the measures to curb COVID-19. But then we find another way, another window, another door to the world. And to us, I think this is the door and the windows that we use during the COVID-19.
I love the phrase, it's our window to the world. It's pretty much how, when reading books, when you're in your own chair or room, and it's your gate to another set of infinite possibilities and other worlds. So I totally agree. And I was indeed just going to mention, and also for the people listening to us, Shazeera has an amazing Instagram account, and the handle is Corona in Cartoon. If you go onto our Human Rights Pulse website, she has the links to her Instagram account are there, as well as to her art portfolio. And you just responded already, but I wanted to ask you about how you used your cartoons during coronavirus to cope with everything. And I think, like, of course, we have published your cartoons, and I made a selection of the ones raising awareness and the ones that are more a hopeful message for the whole of humanity. And I found them very, very reassuring, because you see, even when states become very polarized, and when in times of crisis and emergencies, I see this regression towards nationalism, towards let's close everything and let's protect, in the name of peace and security, and national security especially, we tend to have this othering. Oh, it's always the enemy, the other, coronavirus, the China virus, or whatever happens. Like I remember there was a time when there was a variant from Kent in the UK, and scientists started calling that the Kent variant. And I was seeing British people getting annoyed, saying, "Oh, why are they calling it the Kent variant? As if we are the disease spreaders." And I thought, oh, how about that? Like, how does that sound?
How about that?
100%.
How does that feel?
How does that feel? Exactly. How does that feel? And yeah, so even when I was gonna say, even when all this happens, we realize that the basics of human nature remains the same. So we draw, we read, and we see an image and we feel hopeful again, and we realize that we're all going through the same emotions. And we are all living the same psychological states, and we are all pretty much using maybe not the same tools, but some of us draw, some of us paint, some of us bake a cake. All this is still like a creative pursuit, which you mentioned at the very beginning. So I think that is really really important to stress, and really nice to see. So I guess I'm gonna plug it a bit here into the ArtPulse project. But another feature of our project, besides having the article published, where we have let's call it a photo essay, where the artists have their drawings or their cartoons published, we have the sessions like this one, but we are also aiming to create a completely free digital art space where people can just enjoy some art, whatever that might be. Sometimes it would, I think it's at present, it's mostly cartoons and poems, but soon there will be photographs, and if I can, probably integrate some movement as well. So some dancing, videos of dancing, or music being made, or narrations being told. And because this is very important, to have a place where you can just enjoy a visual image or an artistic output and feel better, because it's a healing, intrinsic healing quality of art, of the creative process at large. So Shazeera, keep doing what you're doing, keep drawing your cartoons, and we will do whatever we can to let everyone know about it. Although I know you said before that some things are, you never go there saying, "Oh, I draw this, I did this." You just, people just know. But it's good. You do amazing things, so it's good to know.
Hope to. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much all I wanted to discuss for today. I just had a question at the beginning. See how when I was shuffling my papers in a bit of a frenzy there, because I actually had so many more things we could
Had
talk
a busy day
tomorrow, but yeah, maybe it's now getting a bit longer. But just one thing, see how when you said that you're in Switzerland, so you feel very privileged, and you feel you use the place where you are at the moment, and you value those risks whenever you're drawing something, because you can, because the Swiss government will never come and take you, and nothing will happen to you.
I hope.
It's gonna turn. We're gonna turn. Next thing we know, the Switzerland is gonna become.
No. I'm not think so. It's okay.
No, of course, but we never know. But no, I was just wondering what you think about what's going on in the world in terms of, we have Belarus, we have actually I guess I'm thinking Belarus in this context on an international level. So we have a crisis of international activists, artists, journalists, lawyers that are scattered around the world and targeted no matter where they are. So I wonder how safe we really are, and whether you ever felt there was a lawyer who called this a transnational suppression of dissent that happens, that is very not fearful, what's the word, is very dangerous, and is very concerning, because it's happening, and no matter where you are, there is this crisis that creatives and activists around the world are in danger. Do you feel that way? Have you seen, have you heard stories about it, or do you think that we are headed into that direction, or that there's hope in the other sense?
Yeah, no, I read, and I even have friends who experience real threats for the work that they do in the art universe. If I just go back to Malaysia, for instance, we have two of our prominent artists. For example, one is Fahmi Reza. He's a very, very old friend and a graphic designer, and he's very, 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 very vocal through his artwork. You know, you can feel his anger, you can feel his opinion coming through his artwork. And of course, he's always been the target by the police. He's always been called for investigations. The same with another one, Zunar, who's also very prominent, in fact, an award-winning cartoonist. I consider him like a mentor. He is also subjected to a lot of censorships, threats, you know, and that only happened in Malaysia. But at the international level, of course, there is I think there is the rise of, I wouldn't say right wing, but I feel, yeah, there is a rise of attempts to suppress the more liberal voice. And to what extent these risks are, I think it depends on your context as well. I think in my case, for instance, of course, I get sometimes hate mails and trolls. I don't engage them. It's a waste of time, to be honest. You know, but in many cases, like for instance, the journalists, the artists, in situations like Belarus, Afghanistan at the moment, Syria, I know that they are really facing a lot of threats. And this is the moment where I think, if possible, all artists around the world, we should stick together with one another. We should build a stronger voice in support of one another, especially those in that terrible context. I don't know if we have one cohesive, united platform for that, but I felt there is strength in number. There's also strength in influence. And of course, not me, but there are a lot of really big names in the art world who has some leverage, you know, and some role that they can play in terms of highlighting these issues, creating some international pressure as well. I think sometimes maybe because of the situation, I don't know, it could be because of a lot of reasons. I never do a proper assessment, but I think we all sometimes in our own cocoon. I feel like that sometimes. I'm in my own world creating, you know, but it's really nice if we as a group of artists can come together and do something for each other, especially for those who really need our support. And this is where, you know, we can bridge artists and human rights advocates and have them in one place. Just want to share, for instance, at the moment, there is like an effort initiated in Malaysia where Zunar, the cartoonist that I mentioned, with the local cartoonists, started having digital exhibitions annually on different themes and topics. So they started last year with freedom of expression during COVID-19. And this year, which is now happening now, in the month of September, they're looking into the issue of freedom of expression. They're looking into the issue of corruption as a culture, because corruption is a huge issue in Malaysia, from the former premier up to the police officer on the road. You know, there's different levels of corruption normalized in our culture. So the idea was to actually highlight this culture through our artwork. So there are 35 artists altogether exhibiting at the moment digitally. It's free for everyone to go. And I think, yeah, I think this is some kind of effort, some examples of what can be done as well. I also know some small or medium publishing or news sites, organizations are also offering short-term schemes and fellowships for artists, especially artists who are under the risk, artists at risk, or during the COVID-19, they could be artists who lost their financial support, or and they need assistance. So I know that there are some efforts. So I feel maybe there could be a platform, or there could be a one-stop center that can offer such support to all artists as well. Yeah, more free muse,
I agree. I really liked how you turned this into a positive thing, because I was a bit concerned when I asked the question, which is one of the last questions. I didn't want to end on a negative note, and you understood very well what I meant with that international aspect.
Mm-hmm.
How people, of course, there are things that happen nationally, say Malaysia or other countries, and then there is a more global threat. And instead of talking about people being threatened, feeling threatened wherever they are, if we manage to build this global support network and really putting pressure on the international community, we become stronger. So the threat becomes weak, and we neutralize the threat, and we just manage to shift completely the balance. And I think that is what we very often see. I would say always, pretty much, whenever we are faced with either an autocratic regime or practices of torture or dissent suppression or unfair imprisonment, there is always this the governments who really are very fragile, and they fear that whatever someone might say, draw, sing, dance, or whatever that happened, that might destroy and make collapse the whole status quo, the whole system. And that is maybe what will happen. So this is like, if we coalesce all together and we create this support, maybe that will happen. Maybe we'll manage to really neutralize that threat and become the stronger part. So I hope, I'm really hoping that. And I find it very funny that Free Muse, well, no, Free Muse is very well known, but how you actually did research on it. And I always find that by doing this job and having these interviews with many people who are apparently all from different parts in the world, not connected to one another, in all continents, and doing different things, there is always, like, whenever I have the next interview, they're like, oh, I actually know that person, or I know where they work for, or I used to work there, I used to have a there. It's very funny, very nice, very enriching. So I guess that I will have to really close it for today. I would love to talk more, and maybe we can have another session, particularly on corruption in Malaysia, another day, because we didn't touch much on that. But I will close this session for today, and you will see that when we publish this, you will have all the information about Shazeera, Shazeera's contacts, as I said, Instagram account, art portfolio, and it would be very nice if we can have from you, Shazeera, the details of the digital exhibition, so that people can access that, which, as you said, is completely free. And then stay tuned, because we, as Human Rights Pulse and the Art Project, are going to bring you our very own digital gallery. So, and that will include Shazeera's work, of course. So I thank you, everyone, very, very much. Sorry that we talked a bit long, but we said so many interesting things, and I would really encourage you to listen to the whole of it, because it's some really good points were made. And thank you, Shazeera, really, Shazeera, sorry, I cannot even speak longer. Like, what am I?
No problem, no problem.
So much for being here, for your time, for your continued support, for working with us. And as you know, we want to collaborate with you again. So our door is always open. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, have a nice day.
Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Draw for change.
Yes.
I just have to say a mantra. I don't know why.